especially for bookkeepers that are kind of figuring it out at the beginning, you think that you're competing against other accountants, but for people who are just starting, you're competing against free. As far as they're concerned, I've been doing my bookkeeping and I was doing fine and it didn't cost me anything, so why should I pay you?
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fantastic one. Our guest is the founder and CEO of Little Fish Accounting, Keila Hill-Trawick. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you, and I will say I did have trouble with that. There's something about getting Hill and Treywick together. It's not friendly on my tongue, but nonetheless, it's great to have you. Now, before we get into the podcast too far, I want to understand and help our listener get to know you. So tell us about you and your career journey leading up to this point.
Yeah, so funny enough, I never worked in public accounting. I tried to get out of accounting a couple of times, actually. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in accounting, worked in corporate or industry for a while from Atlanta, so worked for a lot of Fortune 10 and Fortune 100 companies. Ended up deciding that I wanted to get out of accounting, move into marketing, got my MBA with a concentration in marketing. As luck would have it, I started at a job in the marketing department. They found out I had an accounting background, and I ended up doing the accounting for the marketing department. So it seems like it was kind of meant to be. Around the same time, I decided that I was ready to leave Atlanta and move to DC. And the easiest way for me to get a job was to go into government. As is no surprise to anyone, government doesn't really have marketing jobs, but they have plenty of accounting jobs. And so I started working on internal audits on internal controls. And so I did that for a few years. And towards the end of my W-2 career, I had a bunch of friends and peers who were quitting their jobs and starting their own businesses. And they pretty much had the same complaint, which is I just want to do the work and I don't want to have to worry about this accounting stuff. And as a person who kind of switched jobs every 2 years or so, I was ready for a challenge, ready to do something different, but thought that this would be something that I did on the side. And really understood early on two kind of main focuses that are still tenets for Little Fish today. One is that people wanted to feel educated and empowered. They didn't necessarily want you to just take it off their plate where they didn't have to think about it anymore. They just wanted to understand it better. And two, small businesses tended to get the short end of the stick when it came to accounting support. They tended to get people who treated them with a condescending tone or I'm the wizard, I know better than you. And so they felt like they were not as much of a priority as those who had either more money or more business to give. And so I started Little Fish as a part-time kind of side hustle when I was working for the government. I quit my job a year later to do this full-time. That was March of 2019. I started it by myself, and now we're a team of 6 doing more than I ever imagined for fewer clients than I expected at the beginning.
Wow. So that's interesting. I'd love to hear a few tidbits from that initial first year. What did you do? What were some of the first things you did to get started?
Yeah, so one of the first things that I knew about myself is that I was really good at speaking and explaining things. And so I started with workshops, both kind of co-branded with people in my local community and individual things. I pitched to do a tax workshop at the library. I knew people who owned co-working spaces and the like, and I would do workshops for small businesses there. Like a lot of people who start, I basically would do anything that touched accounting. So if you asked me to do sales tax, I was like, I could learn it and then I would do that. And if you ask me about payroll, I would think, okay, well, I could get a sense of how to do that and I could do that too. So a lot of my first year was feeling out not just who I wanted to serve, but what types of services I wanted to offer, what I could learn and get really good at, and what I could learn but didn't ever want to touch again. There was a lot of just kind of experimentation with different industries, different sizes of businesses, and kind of narrowing down what I thought I ultimately wanted to offer in the firm, even though it felt like a buffet when I first started.
Wow. And those marketing tactics, was there one that was more successful than others or less successful? I'd love to hear how that went.
So I think that the workshops were a really good way for me to get new clients, yes, but it was also practice on how to explain what I did and why it was important. I think early on, a lot of the people that were attending workshops either couldn't afford or weren't really ready for my service, but it helped me to refine my message of like, what makes us different? What are we offering you? What do you need to understand before you even become a client? So that was really good, and then led to how we would improve copy on the website and how I would sell our services on discovery calls. I think one of the other kind of marketing tactics that was really helpful was to partner up with aligned businesses. So talking to lawyers and financial planners and operations, fractional operations people, like who are you serving and what are they saying about the accounting support that they're getting or the parts of it that they don't understand? Because it helped us to really get personal referrals that went beyond just, I know a person that does accounting, you could probably hire them. I would say the last thing that really helped us, especially for our very first customers, was I was a QuickBooks Pro advisor, like early in when we started working. And I think that allowed me to start just getting put in front of small businesses that I might not have otherwise had access to. Now I would probably do that. Oh, you know what? One more thing. Instagram. So at the time, I was already active on Instagram personally, and so it was really easy for me to make a business page and do something over there. That's one thing that I would recommend now, regardless of the platform that you use. Make it easy to show up there. It was really easy because I was already scrolling as an individual to also make posts for Little Fish's page. And I think if I had expanded too far out to all these other platforms that I had to make an intentional effort to go to, I would have been less likely to be successful in those places.
Yeah, it's interesting and some good tips there in terms of how people start. When you were getting started, did you run into any big roadblocks?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I ran into that was actually really scary for me and I underestimated as an entrepreneur is there's nobody to check your work. And so I would do things, I would check them over and over, I'd review them, I'd have a checklist, but that, of course, didn't demand perfection. It was excellent, but it still meant that I made some mistakes. And so that was really scary. I didn't know, who to turn to. I didn't know what the best systems were for me. I think there's a lot more information out here now than there was then, but that was a really isolating experience of what am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be using? So I think knowing what options are out there, knowing that you don't necessarily have to pick the right one, just one that moves with your processes and the way you want to serve. And then two, just getting really good with insurance, covering your work, making sure that if there are ways to use automations or AI or whatever it is to do the first level so that it feels like there's another set of eyes on your work, whether that's human or artificial would have been really helpful. I think finally, in terms of roadblocks, especially because I was by myself, it was very hard, as a lot of people know, to do all of the jobs. So I was doing the discovery calls and I was doing the work and I was delivering the work and I was taking the phone calls. I think knowing early on what things I wanted to hold on to and doing a faster job of delegating the work out that either I wasn't good at or didn't really require me would have helped me not to feel so overwhelmed at the very beginning.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I've heard you say the sales a few times. And I'm curious, Well, tell me about your sales process. I'd like to understand that, because that's something that often people struggle with. How did you figure out the sales end of your business?
Yeah, so it looks very different now. I will say at the beginning, you just signed up for a discovery call. You gave me some information about your business and what you were looking for. We got on a call. I got to know you better. And then I kind of pitched you our service. I think that worked at the beginning to get as many people in. Essentially, you need data, right? Like you need enough clients to start learning what platforms you feel most comfortable in, what niches you feel like you can kind of either lock down into or avoid completely. It also gives you a sense of like what clients are expecting, because what you hear on the call is not always what they actually want when you're in service. As time went on, one of the changes that we made is that you can't automatically book a discovery call. You fill out an application. If you answer the questions in a way that makes it seem like you'll be a good client for us, you're then directed to a discovery call so that we can get to know each other better and you can ask questions about the service. But one of the things that I've gotten to in the business is I am not trying to sell you on this. I'm not trying to convince you that you should pick us. I want to give you enough information for you to really make an informed decision about what's best for you, but I don't want to talk you into it. I learned the hard way several times that if I am talking you into it, you have different expectations than what we may be offering. So a good example is, if a potential client gets on the call and says, this really seems out of budget for me, but I really want to work with you. I think early on, my goal was like to win you over as a business. So I would try to explain to you why it was worth the investment, why you should choose us over others. And you learn, you go into it and you're like, oh, but you really couldn't afford me. And because you couldn't afford our services, maybe you invested in us and didn't get a bookkeeper. And so now you're expecting us to be your whole accountant when you actually just paid for taxes. So I think that transition to let me make sure that we're actually a good fit for each other before we waste anybody's time on the phone has been a progression over the years from I just want to win you to I want to make sure that I'm setting us both up for a long-term relationship that is beneficial to both of us and not just, can I win you as a client?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in the beginning, you want everybody. You figured that out. I like the system. It's a lot more advanced, and had a chuckle there when you were speaking, because I've heard it a few times, and I've said it. It's come out of my mouth a few times, which is it's a little out of my budget or my little and from a bookkeeping perspective, and from the numbers, and likely the person you're talking to actually doesn't even know what their budget is. It's kind of funny when you think, hey, let me just say that if you're going to tell me this is out of your budget, I know that's, absolute garbage, because
you don't even know what your numbers are.
You don't even know your numbers. So I'll tell you what your budget is. How about we start there?
Exactly. And I think that, as an industry, we're all over the place in terms of numbers, and having that understanding at the beginning that we may cost more than like what you think the cost should be or typical. And what I found is that when people would say, I think that you're a little bit out of budget, it was actually in comparing you to other people who do this work, I think they could do it for me cheaper. And so we already started from a disadvantage when I'm trying to convince you why you should pay me more if price is your determining factor on who you're going to choose anyway. That's
right. Yeah, for sure. And I think for the listener, starting there in a conversation for many is making sure, hey, that that's the case, and have that conversation with prospective clients, because often they have no idea what's involved. They have no idea. And that's part of that information gathering process. We talk about it a lot, but every client that comes to you you just have no idea where they've been, what stage they're at, how much pain they've had through getting it wrong or not doing it right. And so if people are fresh out, like really new people into a business, they're just not going to get the value. Like it's hard for them to get it. But someone who's gone through a lot of pain and suffering through not doing the numbers right, they have a different relationship to the value of the work that's being done. Still might not value it, but but would certainly have the pain. So it's like that diagnosis in the sales process is so important.
And
I
I'll
love
add
that.
to that too,
Please do.
like after we have our discovery call, and this wasn't there at the beginning, but is a requirement now, we require an initial diagnostic, a paid initial diagnostic, where we go in, it's very thorough on the back end. We're looking at your books, your accounting system, your P&L, your balance sheet, your reconciliations, all of that stuff, because we have all had the potential client who's like, my books are really simple. I only have a couple of accounts. They're all up to date. And you don't know until you say, yes, I'll sign you on as a client, that you're going to have to do all this cleanup and the work that you've promised for them in that moment. And so it made me think when you were talking about the diagnoses as part of the sales process, we also separated that out as like, before I will even promise you that we'll do bookkeeping for you going on, I need to know what I'm walking into, because if I go look in your books and it turns out that you need a year-to-date cleanup, I need to take responsibility for that and charge you before we go forward. Whereas early on, if you signed on in October, I would just say, okay, well, January through September doesn't belong to me, and we'll just start it going forward. Again, hard lessons. You realize that when it comes to tax time or end of year reporting, the client is expecting that you took responsibility for it. And so when they look at their books and they're like, I don't think my profit is right, it is very difficult to come back and say, well, I don't know what they did January through September, but I promise October through December is correct. Instead, we took the position that we will take over the whole year, but we need to know what we're looking at. And then you need to pay us to clean that up, even if you already had somebody kind of take care of that. And I think that's an important part too, so that you don't muddle the first month of service with, I'm also reviewing to figure things out, I'm getting connected to your accounts, and I'm doing January bookkeeping all at one time. You'll run out of time that way.
Yeah. It's great. I love the paid diagnostic, and it's super valuable to the client too, because I know someone, actually, he's been on the podcast before, Colin. And one of the things that was interesting is his strategy around, this was for a contractor, but the contractor and the relationship to giving a quote is a decent paid diagnostic of the job. Like, and the promise though is that we're going to come back with something that is an intelligent quote that you can bank on, that this will be the number, and then we'll understand the business better. And they would deliver that as well and if you don't choose us, well, you have this diagnostic that you can take to your next person. You know, you're removing risk for a decision maker, which is, okay, well, I'm going to understand my business fully. I'll have this diagnostic. I'm paying for it, but I have something of value. I can take it to if the price comes back, it's really high, I can still take this back to somebody else. You know, it's a really great strategy, and it puts you in the driver's seat because you know what you're dealing with, and you have people that have already made a yes decision working with you. It's really smart.
Yeah, and I think that, to your point, in the reduction of risk, we present a deliverable with a video and a call, right? So we do all of the work on the back end. We present them with this written deliverable with like a snapshot of, here's the things we found, here's the things we have questions on. And then we can give them a proposal that says, based on all of this, this is what it would cost for us to clean it up. This is how long it would take. And to your point about the contract, the client can then decide, if you don't pick us, take this to your next accountant, but you have something that you can start with that. I think of it like your car repairs, and you go take your car in and you thought it was just for an oil change, and they're like, here are all the other things that we found, and you get to decide, am I going to buy new tires today from you? Am I going to take it somewhere else and get tires? But like, I know what's wrong with my car. And I also think that, especially because people have had such varied experiences with accountants and bookkeepers and tax preparers and the like, is it gives the opportunity to also say, hey, the people who have been doing this for you, that looks right. I don't have any questions about what's going on here. Do you know what these accounts mean? To kind of call out their relationship too, in case you're in partnership with somebody else. So if you're a bookkeeper and you do an initial diagnostic and part of your review is, I don't know, you compare their tax return to the end of the year books. If that looks wildly out of order for you, even if you're not doing their taxes, you're a better partner to the person that is, because you've gotten some insight as to what you think that should look like.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's a great analogy around the car, which is often you take your car to the mechanic and you don't know what is coming back. Like it's always like, oh, what's this bill going to look like? Whereas in your situations, it's certainty up front. This is going to cost this much. This is the outcome that you're going to have versus, hey, I'll start working with you and I'll let you know how much all this is going to cost. Well, that could, from a buyer's perspective, that's completely uncertain, and it could be really low. It could be really high. A lot of great features and benefits around that strategy. And really, I don't think enough people utilize that strategy. You've got the onboarding questionnaire. You've got the intelligence around, hey, you're going to answer these 10 questions. It's going to either make you a yes or a no. If you're a yes, we're now going to pitch you, do an initial discovery call, but the sale is really a diagnostic. And then after that becomes a proposal sale, which is very different than selling someone the services. So really nice flow. I love that.
Thank you. And I think that is really good for the bookkeeper too, right? Because once we're in, it's very hard not to make an emotional decision of how much you charge. So if you go in with no diagnostic and you get in there and it's a mess, you may think this is a $5,000 job. But I don't know, because I just got them as a client and I don't want to charge them too much. So maybe I'll just charge them like $2,500 because I don't want them to leave. Because as far as you're concerned, you're already in relationship. It has made it easier for me to say, this initial diagnostic, I see exactly what's wrong and this is what it costs to clean up. But like, these are essentially separate engagements. The first thing is I will diagnose it. The second thing is we will fix it. The third thing is you will go into service. And to your point, if after the diagnostic you think, oh, well, I'm not paying that much for you to fix it, I also don't feel bad or resentful for lowering the price to try to keep you.
That's right. You've not wasted any of your time. You've been paid for your services. And it's clean. It's very nice. And that other piece around, if they're not willing to pay for the diagnostic, well, it's a real simple solution, right? It's like, okay, good luck. Right? Simple. And then if you do the diagnostic, you know exactly what it is. And the person says, well, I don't want to do the cleanup or I don't want to pay for this. It's like, yeah, perfect. This is great. You don't want to work with people like that.
Right.
So it really is a paid way to gain. You're getting paid to acquire clients, and that's different than most. Takes a little bit more upfront work to set that up and make sure you know what you're doing and all that good stuff. But it really is an advanced mode, and I like it a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now you specialize in small businesses. Often overlooked by larger firms. You've talked a little bit about that, the name, Little Fish Accounting. Did that change? You said you thought you have a team of 6 now. You thought you would have more clients than you have, but were they larger clients that you got? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think when I started, my idea of the smaller businesses was a lot of solopreneurs. So a lot of people who were either just starting or maybe had been doing it for a while, but didn't have the complexity of a team or salaries or anything like that. And so they were maybe doing this as a side hustle, maybe just started doing it full time, maybe doing it full time for a while, but like didn't have a lot of context around their finances. And that's something that I would bring up too, especially for bookkeepers that are kind of figuring it out at the beginning. You think that you're competing against other accountants, but for people who are just starting, you're competing against free. As far as they're concerned, I've been doing my bookkeeping and I was doing fine and it didn't cost me anything. So why should I pay you? And so I think early on, my thought was, I need to convince you that you need to have a professional do it for you. And so we had a lot more clients paying us a lot less, but their needs were simpler. As time went on, I realized, one, I wanted to be a more holistic partner. So we went from, for example, we don't do tax filings by themselves. You have to sign up for a year-long process. We weren't just doing like bookkeeping alone. It needed to include maybe automations and financial statements or whatever we ended up including, but it was a package of sorts. And so early on, we had a lot of tiers and a lot of different people in those tiers. And my job was the task. Okay, you asked for bookkeeping, we charge you this much. I did the bookkeeping, the end. You would like financial statements, that costs this much. I will make sure that you get those. What we realized is actually we could charge more and provide a better experience for those with more complex needs when we focused on the relationship. And so now Little Fish focuses on service providers with generally one owner, sometimes two, with very small teams. So usually they have less than 10 employees, maybe some contractors, because it was this sweet spot of you are just complex enough that the basic task won't necessarily be sufficient for you, but you aren't so advanced that you need an in-house person. And so what that meant is that we could take a lot fewer clients, and do more for them. And that's something that I would recommend to people too, is like, figure out where on that spectrum do you want to be. You can serve a lot more clients if you're not talking to them as often, if you're not sending as many deliverables. If what you want is to be behind the scenes and just make sure that it's done, that is a different service, potentially a lower price service, but for more people than it is when you say, I'm going to get on a weekly or biweekly or monthly call, and I'm going to send you videos, and I'm going to do all of these things. Your bandwidth is going to be capped by the human capacity on your team. And so figuring out where you want to be there helps you to determine your pricing, but it also helps to determine like how many clients you can really serve in that way, given how much time each of them will take from you and or your team.
Very cool. Very cool. So your firm emphasizes building a business that's just right rather than chasing endless growth. And I'd really like to know your mindset on that and how you came about that.
Yeah, so Built to Enough, we have a podcast too, and it's one of kind of the foundational tenets for what we do at Little Fish. What I think about, not just for our clients, but even other accountants, is there is an emphasis in the world on hypergrowth, that like, if you can do more, you should. There's always this fear of leaving money on the table. Even from what we talked about at the beginning of starting your firm, you're like, if 10 more people would pay me, why wouldn't I take those 10 people? I should be getting as much as possible. And what many of us learn either through burnout or bad situations, or even just trying to like figure out how that balances with our lives, is that more isn't always better. And what I realized is that a lot of us were so busy growing that things were breaking along the way that we weren't fixing. And this came to a head for me. We had a client who had made maybe her first 7 figures, and we were talking about goals for next year. And she was like, next year, I think we can make 2 or 3. And I said, but making 1 million felt like trash. Like you were miserable the whole year. You were like breaking down a lot. I'm not saying that we shouldn't shoot for that, but like, what if we could just make 1 million again, but easier? What if we could improve the processes that made you get paid faster and have the team that you wanted and look at your profit before we just jumped to like making more money? And what that opened and unlocked for me was this idea that as long as we are always focused on getting the next thing, we will ignore a lot of the things that are falling along the way. And that can be from, this system worked when I had 5 clients, and it is a lot more manual when I have 30 clients. It could be this team worked when I was serving fewer people, but now I need to hire more people to be able to support that. And I think that if we were more intentional to say, I'm just going to get to this point of enough, whatever that enough looks like, I'm going to stop and reevaluate. Like, do I want to make more? If I make more, am I going to spend so much more money that I didn't even get the benefit financially of doing so? What can we do to make sure that we're making decisions that are in alignment with the lives that we want to live, and not just growth by any means, knowing that down the line, we're going to have to face the problems that we weren't facing at the beginning.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I like it. And I think this often overlooked is people just think about big versus what is actually the right fit for the individual, and also simple. Like simple is undervalued often, and it's so valuable when you have it in your life. You've got a team of 6. How did you grow your team? What was that like? And how do you how do you keep your culture together? And how does that come about?
Yeah, we're a fully remote team, have been since the beginning. When I started, it was me and a bookkeeper. I was like, if I have a bookkeeper to like help me, I will be fine. And then I needed an admin because I couldn't send out proposals and follow up and answer all my emails at the same time. Now we have a team of me, 2 senior accountants, a tax account manager, an ops manager, and what we call our connections manager, who does like marketing, partnerships, all of those things. What I will say, thinking back, is were I to do it over again, I would have hired for releasing tasks faster. I think what I thought I needed was like workers to like just get things that I needed to get out of my head off of my plate. But actually, I should have been more focused on getting people who could help me get client delivery faster. So, for example, it probably would have been more efficient, or I don't know if better is the right word, but if I had gotten our accounting team structured faster, I probably could have taken care of proposals and emails and all of that because I wouldn't have been so bogged down in the work. And instead, I was offloading work that wouldn't have been as difficult for me to do if I had more help on the deadline focused stuff. So given the opportunity, if I were to start over today, I think I would really focus on how can you get that base level work out of your lap. And that is everything from who can categorize to who can look into this software and see if it could do some things faster for us so that I'm not the only person that's investigating that. I think your ability to build a team to take the quote bottom layer of work out of the way helps everybody to level up to say, if these things are in place and we've got whether it's automations or software or just a process in place of how we do it, the more streamlined we get that, the more everybody is really using their brains to up-level the experience for clients. And I think I was so focused on the experience and then I would just work all night to get the task done. It would have been more helpful to have somebody on the team early on who could help me do that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And do you find that you have people started with you and stayed with you? Do you have turnover? How does that all look?
Yeah, I guess a bit of both. We definitely have people who have been with us 4 or 5 years, and we have people who just started this year. The ways that we change services led to turnover. I think that that's natural. Once I started realizing, oh, this is, for example, more relationship based, it was no longer sufficient for you to be really good at accounting. You also needed to know how to talk to people. You also needed to know how to respond in emails and get on calls. And that wasn't what I needed at the beginning because I was the only person that was talking to people. So we've definitely had turnover there. We've also had turnover as we created more standards of excellence. And so when I was willing to be a reviewer that would just like clean up any messes, people could stay longer. And when I started putting the accountability on like, this is your job. For example, you own the accounting system. If you provide something to me as complete, I'm expecting that you've gone through this whole checklist. There were definitely people who were so focused on like, I categorize transactions, check. And I'd say, but then I looked at the financial statements and that didn't look wrong to you. Like you should catch your own anomalies because you own this. That wasn't necessarily what people signed up to do. I'd say the last thing to keep in mind, especially if you have a remote team, is really setting expectations for work. I think early on when I was hiring people, there were potentially team members who saw this as like a side thing that they were doing from home. And I felt like I had to reemphasize, like, no, you work all day here. I need to be able to reach out to you and you be responsive. I need these things done by a specific point of the day. And the flexibility that you think you're getting with remote work would have, for example, I had work that was turned in at 10 p.m. on a deadline. And I'm like, that is late. If it's due on Tuesday, it's due Tuesday before we close. Doing it before midnight isn't the same. And so learning that that was important to me and then instituting team members who would really follow that led to some firings that are always hard, led to some hires that weren't necessarily the right fit. I feel like we have a really good team now, but it took some time to get there.
Very cool. Very cool. This is a lot. It's fantastic episode. Lots of great nuggets for our listener, and I would imagine we could keep going. We'll have to have come back.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll end with the last question here, which is, what trends do you see shaping the industry? It's lots is changing always, but I'd love to get your perspective on it.
One of the things that I think is really changing, and I'm hoping that this is not just in my bubble, but is industry wide, is a lot more collaboration. I've seen a lot more people who are niching either in the services that they offer or the industries that they're serving, and being able to say, I don't have to say provide taxes or provide advisory. I can focus on the bookkeeping and partner with other accountants who are offering those other services as part of a team. I think we're trending more towards that, especially for very small firm owners versus the I will be the all-in-one conglomerate. I think another thing that we've been seeing happening for years, but is becoming more obvious now, is people really wanting the human touch, right? Like they know that they could go to one of these major corporations and just get the thing done. Where they really find value in firms like ours and firms like the listeners, even if you're running it yourself, is they want to talk to you. They want to have a relationship with you. They want to feel like somebody cares. There's a lot of private equity and corporate involvement and all of those where people are used to the task getting, quote, done. But when they get a letter, when they don't understand their books, when they get to the end of a month and they're like, I don't know what this means, they're not getting the support that they're really looking for. And I think this is a really special time for humans to really step in and say, what makes me different is I will talk you through this. I will make a video so that you understand. I will answer your questions in a timely fashion and be responsive and move from the transactional really into the relational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. I love that. I had an experience where we had to get a new dishwasher, and there was an installation fee, and I'm like, yeah, I want an installation. I want to make sure that it gets done correctly, and it was with a big company.
Yeah.
Very, very good brand and experience. Like you expect that. Okay, well, I get it. It's a nice dishwasher, and this person's going to come, and it's all going to get done correctly. And the installation was basically, we're going to install it if it's exactly going to fit. Like the hose is the same, the plug's the same, there's nothing. So this situation was different type of dishwasher that had to go in. And it's like, no, we don't do that. So it comes back to that bigger and better and these larger firms that often you think you're going to get a better experience. It's the person who saved the day was the general handy person that we work with that comes in and assesses the situation, gets it done correctly, and is there from the start to the finish, and the dishes are getting washed. And I think that's exactly what more and more people want, is just someone that's going to make sure they get taken care of and done well and done right. And if you're the person that can offer that, well, you're going to do well.
Yeah, and there's so many feelings about finances. There's so many bad or uncomfortable experiences that people have. Like they want to feel heard, they want to feel cared for. And a client told me the other day, her goal is that she can trust that nothing is missing. She knows she's not going to see everything or know how everything works. She wants to be able to put her trust in someone else to say, I got you. I'm going to cover it. If anything comes up, I will cover that too. And just being a person in that experience, in that partnership is just going to become more and more important as we have so many other bigger companies or bigger firms that just aren't able to provide that one-on-one attention that we are.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's lovely. If people want to learn more about you, you have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about that, where they can find you and get access to the things you're doing.
Yeah, so you can find out about me, about what I think about Bill to Enough, both for accountants and for service providers at billtoenough.com. You can also find the podcast Bill to Enough everywhere that you listen to your podcast. We'll be back in the new year with that, and would love to hear from you. We're also on Instagram at Little Fish Accounting.
Beautiful. Well, that's great. Really want to thank you for your time and generosity being on the show.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been our pleasure. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.